I've always believed that pastry chefs are born, not made. They're patient, methodical, tidy and organized. It's why I stick to the savory side of the kitchen. I'm far too messy and impulsive to do all the measuring, timing and rule following that pastry demands. The temperament of nearly every other cook I've met further proves my theory. I know pastry chefs who are overwhelmed by the idea of tasting, rather than measuring, their way to a balanced vinaigrette. And the savory chef who taught me how to cook can't properly whip an egg white to save his life, though you didn't hear that from me. But there is one notable exception, my friend Amalia Marino, who is both versatile and precise. I've watched her confidently grill 100 duck breasts, carefully moving each one as rendering fat threatened to drip into the coals and send up a flare. And I've seen her roll out flaky pastry dough, then adorn it with slices of red and green fleshed plums in striking patterns only an art school graduate could conjure. For Marino, the choice to straddle both sides of the kitchen is deliberate. It's just the way I was raised, she said. Her grandfather was obsessed with self-reliance and skillfulness. He taught Marino to use a table saw and to catch, gut and scale a fish by the time she was 6. He just wanted me to be capable in every way. So when Marino decided to pursue cooking, it was natural that she'd learn how to do it all in the kitchen too. Recently Marino mentioned that she'd made soufflé for breakfast. It's so light, a cloud of eggs, cheese and herbs. I make it all the time. I'd never gone to the trouble to make soufflé in the morning, but somehow it didn't seem weird that Marino would. The only thing I couldn't figure out was her timing. It takes at least an hour to prepare a soufflé base, and you can't really do it the night before. So I asked if a breakfast soufflé was really worth losing 90 minutes of precious sleep. No. Marino corrected. Not a soufflé. A soufflazy. Delighted equally by her portmanteau and the implication of a shortcut for a notoriously finicky dish, I pressed for more information. Oh, it's just this thing I made up, she replied. It's kind of crazy, but it works. Marino went on to explain that both sweet and savory cooking have contributed to her thinking about soufflés. From pastry chefs, Marino learned the importance of whipping egg whites to just the right point, a silky, medium stiff peak strong enough to form the scaffold that will support the whole soufflé. Whip egg whites by hand, or with a mixer set at a slow speed in order to create air bubbles of a consistent size and ensure the soufflé rises evenly. Savory cooks, generally less nuanced with egg whites, often whip whites too fast and too far, until they grow chunky and dry. But pastry chefs know it's always better to underwhip slightly than to overwhip. If you're not sure what that looks like, just stop whipping as soon as the whites stand nearly upright on an upturned whisk. Leave a little bit of flop. Like a rubber band, whipped egg whites are elastic to a certain point. If you underwhip them, the worst that will happen is that they won't be strong enough to support a melodramatic rise. But if you overwhip them, you'll snap the rubber band. The egg whites will weep away their water, and your soufflé will rise unevenly and come out dry. Marino learned another crucial tip from the sweet side: when combining previously separated eggs, both parts should be warm to ensure a happy reunion. In pastry we always heat our eggs pretty aggressively over a water bath, she said. When I dip my finger in, I'm always surprised by how very warm they are. Over the course of years, her soufflés started emerging from the oven textbook perfect, tall, flat, golden, and billowy. But then one night, she watched with thrill and alarm as a savory cook made a soufflé to order. He just folded the whites into the prepared base and spooned the mixture onto a buttered metal platter, she said. There was no water bath. He didn't fret about whether the souffle grew straight up. Since metal conducts heat so much more quickly than traditional ceramic ramekins, the free-form souffle swelled up into a gorgeous puff in about 10 minutes. To serve, the cook scooped out generous spoonfuls alongside a green salad dressed with a sharp vinaigrette. Marino recounted, "It was as flawless as any classic souffle I'd ever tasted. Once I saw that, I thought, I can do anything I want." A few days later, when Marino woke craving not scrambled eggs but souffle, she poked through her scant pantry. No flour, no milk, no patience to make bechamel. But she did have some leftover goat cheese and thyme, so she decided to break the rules the way only a savory cook will. Drawing upon her understanding of sabayon, another egg dessert, she beat the yolks together with the goat cheese over a simmering pot of water until they thickened. Then she warmed, whipped, and folded in the egg whites and spooned the whole thing onto a buttered baking sheet and slid it into a hot oven. When the souffle emerged 12 minutes later, Marino couldn't believe her eyes. It was wide rather than tall, but the moment she dipped in a spoon, a gust of thyme-scented air escaped. Lazy or not, the souffle was as light as ether just the same. Having come up with a savory breakfast only a pastry chef could have created, she served it all alongside the only other thing she had in the fridge, a handful of bitter greens dressed, to taste, with oil and vinegar. A goat cheese souffle, for breakfast. Recipe, Amelia's goat cheese soufflazy.